Hello, good morning. Welcome to the morning program, The Dailies, where we keep you up to date with some of the stories that are the headlines on the Nigerian newspaper. I am Sarah Elisha Dasham, and I hope that you're enjoying your break wherever you are. So do well to join us through Facebook and YouTube. Drop your comment, your views on any of the story we will be looking at this morning. I will be doing the program with Rachel Tansy. Good morning.
Morning,
How you
Sarah.
doing?
I'm fine, and you?
Great. How's weekend?
It was fine. How was
How
yours?
was the break?
It was okay, thank God.
Alright. Okay, so we shall go straight into the paper and we will be starting with the Nigerian News Direct newspaper.
The big story on the paper: anxiety as Rivers government issues ultimatum to local government chairman to vacate councils. Police tightens security as youth their chairman to resume. Details can be found on page 14. Fidelity Bank ranked amongst top banks in ESG rating. Cholera outbreak: Lagos Island records highest number of 106 suspected cases, a report from the commissioner. You can find details on page 4. Whoever stops my constituents from receiving dividends of democracy is my enemy, a statement from a Benue speaker. Court jails man for impersonating EFCC staff to extort 1.1 million naira. Details can be found on page 14. We have a picture story where we can see the Senate President Akpabio and then President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, and that's all the news on Nigerian News Direct.
On the Voice of Liberty, EFCC received 14,000 petitions in 1 year coming from their chairman, Olukoyode. You can find more detail of that in the paper. Escalating costs of foodstuff: we only eat to survive, not satisfactory, Nigerians lament, and that is the reality of Nigerians presently. We have hardship allegation: presidency denounced NY, that is the New York Times report, defense Tinubu. You can find that story in the paper. Army to deploy 5,937 new special forces soldiers to fight banditry and others. This is coming from the Chief of the Army Staff, where we see that 5,937 soldiers that recently passed out from the Nigerian Army Depot in Zaria, Kaduna State, will be deployed to fight banditry, cattle rustling, and related crimes. The Chief of Army Staff, Lagbaja, has said that. You can find more detail of that in the paper. El-Rufai neglected southern Kaduna for 8 years, coming from Sheikh Husani. And as well, we're seeing Dangote raises concern over workings of African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. Multi-choice bows to pressure revert to the old DSTV and GoTV subscription prices, and this came after they lost over 1.2 million subscribers. More detail can be found in the paper. Nigeria lost 400,000 barrels of crude oil daily. This is a report. Conspiracy by industry regulators, security agency fingered. More detail of that story can be found in the paper, and that's all on the Voice of Liberty.
On Leadership newspaper, tenure expiration: Rivers youth take over local government secretariats. Ignore Wike's critics, CSOs urge President Tinubu. We have trending: police kill bandit, arrest 3 in FCT. Numbers: Nigeria's inflation rate increases to 33.95%. You can find both trends and numbers on page 2. Obi falls plan to buy new presidential jet amid hardship. You can start with the details on the front page. Murtala Mohammed will not renamed after Shoinka, coming from the federal government. Details can be found on page 6. The big story: inadequate infrastructure. Nigeria fails to stop 1.4 trillion naira lost to medical tourism as public hospitals face shortage of health workers and others. Private facilities rip off hopeless Nigeria patients. You can find details on page 4. Flutterwave unveils data from remittance platform and send app. In Gaza, Netanyahu disbands war cabinet. APC group rejects nomination of LP PDP chieftain. You can find details on page 4. Obasanjo visits Remi Tinubu for Salah celebration. Details can be found on page 12, and that's all the news on Leadership newspaper.
Yeah, Rachel, I think I'd love us to talk about a big story. Nigeria fails to stop the 1.4 trillion naira loss to medical tourism. And we're seeing here that most of our public hospitals are facing shortage of health workers and others. Rachel, it would have been even bearable if we are only having shortage of health workers. But as it is presently, we don't have the health workers as well as we don't even have drugs in the hospital, Rachel. So when you go to the hospital right now, they will tell you that this is the drug that has been prescribed for you to take, but they do not have it. And so you have no choice but to go outside. And then even outside, we remember how much drugs, especially those that are made outside the country, are. And we're seeing that a number of people, we saw that I think last year or beginning of this year, where a number of Nigerians have resorted to even going for herbal drugs.
Yeah.
Why? Because they cannot even afford it. We saw how much the paracetamol costs. We saw how much some antibiotics cost as well, because people really need this. And then let's also talk about the issue of cholera. Definitely, you will need 1 or 2 supplements and all of that, apart from the ORS that you need to make to arrest it immediately. We have a number of things that need to be done, and then we know that cholera doesn't come alone. It comes with other brothers and sisters. Eventually, you have to start treating typhoid if it has gotten very, very terrible, depending on your system and all of that. So I don't know what our government is doing about this. I was seeing here Peter Obi is already talking about the issue of the new presidential jet. And then we're seeing that the federal government is also denying what the New York Times is talking about, the fact that presently there is a hardship allegation. Are we really facing hardship in the country or not is a question. And secondly, are people really going through all of this thing? We're seeing how much our inflation is, about 33.94, rounded up, that's 34%. So I do not know what the inflation for June will look like eventually. So when we see things like this, I'm just hoping that our government is not all about coming to defend. It's not all about saying that this is not what it is, but what are you doing about this? We saw the issue of inadequate facilities, public hospitals having just one generator, and the generator is not even functional as it is presently. So if you need things to be done, you just have to look for a way to put money together and go to private hospital, and we know it's very, very expensive. Yes, we have doctors being every now and then we have induction being done for doctors, but then where are the doctors? And so it's a question. I just hope that the government will be able to answer it, because yes, we'll have them, but eventually they're looking for a way to leave the country. So we have to do something about the issue of inadequate facilities, shortage of public health workers, and even the issue of, let's see how we can have our own homemade drugs here in the country, so that we don't have to rely on multinational companies that left to be able to take some drugs that can actually arrest some of the things we're going through.
Of course, Stella, when it comes to the health sector, it needs to be very balanced. As far as I'm concerned, before we will get to that point, it needs to be very, very balanced, because here we're talking about infrastructure, and security is also an infrastructure that we need when it comes to our medical sector and all of that. Talking about the generators not functional, just having one means of electricity generation in a hospital and all of that. And when you look at it, until we get a balance, we are going to keep seeing hardship in the health sector. For example, even if we have our doctors and you're paying them well, if there are no infrastructure, it means that they will not perform. They will be incompetent to a large extent. And whether we have good doctors on ground, whether they are being paid well, and there is no infrastructure for them to be able to work with, we will still spend on medical tourism. Because in the end, you go to the hospital, there is a doctor, there are health workers available, but there are no equipment to solve your problems. So we will still spend money on medical tourism either way. Fine. You have the things on ground, but then there are no doctors. You will still find your way out to where all of these things are available. I hope the government of Nigeria sits up and see that when it comes to the medical sector, is not one that you can just do with one and leave the other. If one part of it is struggling, every other part of it will struggle, and then you will not see the effect at the end of the day. And if we're to ask ourselves, what is the government doing about the health sector? As it is now, I don't see anything evident enough to say the government is doing something about it. Amid hardship, you're moving in for a private jet. And then the question is, what have the president been using to travel? At this point in time, is this really what should be on the top of the list for the Nigerian government? If we are going to be honest, at times at this, when it's not a hardship accusation, or it's the truth. Is what gone are the days where if tomato is really really expensive, a basket will be at most 8-10,000 naira. That's when, if we must say, okay, things are really really expensive, a basket of tomato because of the season doesn't move above 8,000. That's when people are lamenting that it's very expensive and all of that. But how much is a basket of tomato right now? We're looking at over 20, looking at 30,000. And perhaps in our region here, exactly in our region here where we farm it, I can imagine what others are getting it for in other places, that they have to wait for it to be supplied to them and all of that. So there is hardship. Nobody's accusing the government. It's our reality, is what we are facing, is what we are going through. It's not an accusation. And in the midst of something like that, and we are seeing the government trying to prioritize something that could even be the bottom on the list of the problems in the country, you just can't help but wonder and see, okay, let's be fair. Let's really, really look at the situation. What is the government doing about it? Let's not be biased. Let's not just be blinded. Let's not just cover our eyes. Let's really look deeply and see, okay, what is the government truly doing about the situation in the country? I mean, if there's something they're doing out there, perhaps we don't know. It's about time we know about it. And so that we will be rest assured that, you know what, something will soon come to the surface, and then Nigerians won't have to lament about their situation. It's really a sad one. But as far as I'm concerned, our health sector is still going to struggle. For me, it's just the beginning of the health sector struggling. There's just more damage that is going to come to the health sector.
You know, as you just said, Richard, I just can't help but wrap my head around the fact that if we're thinking that this is just the beginning, eventually our health sector is going to crash down. That is the implication of this. And then I really cannot help but imagine, with this outbreak of cholera, we need them on ground, Rachel. We need them, because this is one of the things that especially children die of, because they are more prone to, you know, dirty water, dirty hands, contaminated food and all of that. So I hope that our government really prioritizes. As I was looking at the issue of this private jet, I just remember, was it a rumor when we had the issue of the private yacht last year?
Yeah,
we did have that. I hope that this is another rumor that they should come out and say, no, nothing of that sort is actually happening.
True.
Well, let's take a look at Daily Independent newspaper. New presidential jet Obi takes a sweep at Tinubu over move to add to fleet. Describe move as impunity, insensitivity, shamelessness. You can find detail of that on page 7, and he said that on his X handle on Monday. I'll go seek 4-year tenure for elected local government officials. That's the Association of Local Governments of Nigeria has called for the adoption of a unified 4-year tenure for elected local government officials in the country. You can start reading that on the front page and continue on page 28. Fresh crisis bills in PDP over Rivers Assembly lawmakers' case, with the writer saying stakeholders call for suspension of PDP National Legal Advisor. Tinubu surrounded by 8 associates setting him up to fail, coming from Lukman. We remember one of the APC members that actually dumped the party. So he is the one saying that the president is surrounded by 8 and associates that are setting him up to fail. You can read more detail of that on page 7. Abuja's Murtala Mohammed will not rename after Shoyinka coming from the federal government. We will record about a month or so where we saw that they said during part of the, I think beginning of this year, rather June, where we saw the president going around to do some various inaugurations of roads in the FCT. One was being named after Shoyinka, and here the federal government is coming out to say that the Murtala Mohammed way was not renamed after Shoyinka, so you can find the proper name on page 7. UNICEF wants federal government to prevent the spread of cholera in schools. More detail on page 29. Kwara governor says brighter days lie ahead of Tinubu's reform. NAF confirms neutralization of over 80 terrorists in Katsina. Lagos restates support for SMEs as State Tourism NBC 3-day trade fair ends. And on tenor dispute tension as youths and police take over Rivers Council Secretariat. Police threaten troublemakers assure on citizen safety. Go home, your tenure has ended, Asari tells the local government chairman. You can find more in the paper. Tinubu to attend Ramaphosa inauguration. That's talking about he will be traveling to South Africa. You can find more detail of that on page 7. And that's all on Daily Independent newspaper.
On this day newspaper, the big story, Rivers LG's crisis. Showdown looms, armed groups vow to sack council chairman. CP to troublemakers, steer clear, don't be used as cannon fodder. Asari Dokubo urges council heads to vacate office immediately. Invoke doctrine of necessity to stop impending anarchy. Group urges National Assembly. You can find details on page 9. New report says Nigeria's liquefied natural gas expansion drive faces severe future risks. List shrinking EU consumption, high cost of production as downsides. You can start with the details on the front page and continue on page 9. Military rescue 35 women, children in Lake Chad. Airstrikes kill over 80 terrorists in Katsina. Details can be found on page 15. Netanyahu sacks war cabinet amid growing pressure. Details can be found on page 21. Tinubu's reforms meant to refocus economy for sustainable growth, says Kwara governor. Pleads for patience from citizens. Details can be found on page 9. And then we have a picture story where we can see from left to right, Minister of Education of Chad, and then we have Minister of Education Ghana, we have World Bank Vice President for Human Development, Minister of Education Brazil, and Edo State Governor Godwin Obaseki after a panel session at the Accelerating Progress Towards SDG 4 stock state of transformation action in education covered by the SDG 4 high-level steering committee held at UNESCO headquarters in Paris, France. This happened yesterday, and the picture is tagged Education Leaders Meet as UNESCO to take stock of transformative actions in sector. And that's all the news on this day newspaper.
I'm wondering, and I was searching, Rachel, where is the Minister of Education Nigeria? Because I'm really worried. We saw that last week, the fact that a number of things are happening in the education sector, especially we saw that where the minister or the ministry rather is having trouble, where we're seeing that proprietors are choosing to stick to the British curriculum rather than choosing something that is more peculiar, what we use here in Nigeria and West Africa. And then I'm surprised I'm only seeing the governor. And I believe, or my speculation will be that he's there on behalf of his state, not on behalf of Nigeria.
Of course not,
So I was expecting the Minister of Education Nigeria to be there, but he's nowhere to be found in this picture. I just hope he's somewhere. But if he's not there completely, I really see that as an eyesore, and I hope that we'll prioritize the same way we're talking about our health sector, the same way I am hoping that we prioritize education. We keep saying that any nation, any generation that is not educated, we are heading to doom, and that is what we're seeing is happening. So let us show the future generation that we prioritize education and that we're willing to go as far as it will take to make sure that education is being prioritized in the country. So we'll just hope that eventually our leaders know what they are doing with regard things like this. Let's take a look at the Guardian newspaper then. On the Guardian newspaper, out of stock, anxiety as 200% hike, scarcity hit hospital, essential drug market, where we can see this picture here with the write-up, doctors worried over unavailability of drugs for their patient, result to herbs. And we ask if those herbs have been tested and they can actually cure. So this is one of the issues we are facing as well in the health sector, and I hope that our government will take up this challenge and do something regarding that. Cost of revenue collection gobs 214.29 billion naira in the first quarter of 2024. You can find that on page 3. Student loan application, surmounting analog database, shady admission hurdles, and others. And I think this was one of the things, Rachel, you were raising a concern concerning the loan. And here we're seeing there's some shady admission. So that is be who knows who to be able to get that loan. And this was something we're fighting. And no wonder you and I were saying we should have an office, a standing, a physical office that you can go there. But then we know the way our leaders are. We always find a way of having corruption no matter the sector. And I'm wondering, I mean, those who really need this loan might not actually get the loan because of this shady thing. I hope that something will be done. This is an analysis you can find on page 4 of the Guardian newspaper. Stakeholders fume over federal government's plan to develop new deep seaport. It's a business news you can find on page 15. And on Hajj, 19 die, others missing as heat wave forces Saudi Arabia to reschedule stoning rites. You can find that on page 3. Lukman Abdulrazak, others score Tinubu's administration on economy and promises. You can find what the scorecard is. Air Force confirmed killing 100 terrorists in Castina raid. And coming from Rivers State, Youths Occupy Rivers Council Secretariat as 21 chairmen vow to return to office. More detail can be found on page 29. And that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune, tension in Rivers over control of LG Council as tenure of chairman expires. Youth storm LGA Secretariat asks chairman to vacate office. Police warn troublemakers. Nigeria must prevent spread to school disease on cholera, and then UNICEF is warning cholera strain in Lagos highly contagious, but cases now declining. This is an assurance from the state government. Nigeria's inflation ranks highest among African countries in May. This is a research. You can find details on page 6. Board appointment, APC members reject Abia nominees. Right Tinubu says only 2 belong to party. Obasanjo visits Tinubu's wife in Lagos, and then we have a picture story showing that. You can find details on page 4. Reps push for elections of President, National Assembly, State Assembly same day. Algon seeks 4-year tenure for LG officials. Hoodlums attack Plateau board officials, burn houses and 10 vehicles. Details can be found on page 5. Obi kicks against proposed purchase of presidential aircraft, says government plans to buy new jets demonstrate extreme insensitivity to citizens' struggles. Details of his statement and more can be found on page 14. Nigerian pilgrim dies of heat stroke on Arafat Day. Details can be found on page 3 and 4, and that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
You sure the issue of what happened in Plateau State yesterday, I really think it's really a sad one.
It is.
And we saw that the government have been trying to sanitize the whole place, clearing people who sell things by the roadside. Of course, there are a lot of shops. I mean, I was in Satellite Market yesterday, and there are a lot of empty shops, and you wonder, why don't we have these traders using these shops, but rather choosing to cause nuisance? And we saw the same thing, apart from that being done in the Terminus Market of Jos. We saw that also being done in Bukuru, South Local Government area of the same state. And I wonder, according to reports coming up, said that they were the clearing started before yesterday, and then yesterday people were back again on the road, and then before we realized it, they were clearing of things, and then before we knew it, people started setting up tires on fire, flames. There are pictures circulating the social media, and a lot of people were being warned not to use that axis because of the unrest happening there. And I just hope that people can just choose to be law-abiding citizens. I know that sometimes we do see where task force rather choose to use other ways. You and I have talked about the fact that if you are facing civilians that are without arms, there's a better way to address them. But reports has it that there was a bullet that killed someone yesterday, and that was when the whole thing started. But regardless of how the story is, whether there was a straight bullet or not. But I just hope that we have citizens that are law abiding, and we also have security operatives that are meant to, enforce the law. There are better ways you can actually relate with citizens rather than, we having them like having a combat back to back fight, and then before we realize that these are little things that can spike crisis. We know that Plateau State is one of those sensitive states that any little thing can give birth to something that we did not plan for eventually. So I'm hoping that a better approach, a better way can be done about this. If there is a shop, make use of the shop, leave the roadside so that we can actually, you'll be able to sense whether people are really indigents of the state or not, because everybody can disguise and say I'm a trader, but then they are actually terrorists hiding in disguise. So I'm hoping that a better measure will be put in place so that we can prevent issues such as these, where we see that houses are burned and vehicles as well are being burned down.
Shall seeing what happened yesterday, I doubt it much if we want to grow. I honestly doubt it. I'm just at the point where the more I say we are light years behind when it comes to development and civilization, I just keep seeing the facts and the proof that we truly are light years behind when it comes to development and civilization, and we don't want to grow. When you see people that want to grow, no matter how difficult a decision taken by your government is, you will abide by it. Are we going to sit down and say for a start it might be bad market? Yes. Does it change the fact that that is a market? No. It doesn't change the fact that, but when you reject orderliness and organization, you reject civilization. Because I keep saying it, the word civilization might sound big, but it just means organized. It means you're organized. It means you're orderly. It means you follow, you go by the books. You follow order. You go by an order, you follow it, and all of that. That's basically what civilization is. And then when we fight it this much, you sit down and you see Europe and you're like, oh, it's beautiful. You sit down and you see all these beautiful countries and you want to be like it. You admire it, you dream and you wish to go there. And you ask yourself, how did they get there? There was once a time they had markets scattered everywhere. And then they grew to the point that say, you know what, we need to be organized. We need our streets to be better. We need to put certain things in so place for health, for this, and that. Because there was also once a place where they had all the outbreaks that we're having now, cholera, different kinds of flu, different kinds of disease that kill thousands of people. All of these countries were once there. And they grew above that, to the extent that they are clean, to the extent that they are organized, to the extent that we are running to them and all of that. And when I look at our actions, I say we are truly light years behind when it comes to advancement in any kind of way. Because our actions prove whether we want to grow or not. And then when you fight a government that is trying to organize you, to order you, to make you civil, then you are obviously saying we don't want to grow. We don't want to become better. We don't want to be. The government is not taking away the market from you. They are organizing the market. They are not stopping you from buying and selling, but they're telling you this is not, you are selling on the road. How will the government spend so much money to build a dual carriage expressway, and then we are still living on it as it is one it's not a dual carriage expressway. We are dealing with it as if it's just a residential driveway and all of that, because it's how will so much resources be spent on trying to build a road and then it's not being maximized, and you are fighting it and you just see the mindset. Our mindset says we want to be stagnant, we want to stay. Change doesn't come easy. Most of the time it's uncomfortable. But you have to, I keep imagining, I say, you know what, if I am a trader on that road, I will accept it. It might be painful. It might mean 1 or 2 days of bad market, because now you're trying to find your way left, right, center. But in the end, am I not looking 10, 20 years into the future? Why are we myopic? Why are we so short-sighted that we can't see far ahead to see what this will mean for the economy, what this will mean for the system, for our children, for the future. Why are we so short-sighted? And it just proves the fact that, you know what, we have work to do. We have work to do. We have a mindset to fix. We there's just work. It's not all about the government. This is the point in time where we can't point fingers at the government and then we question ourselves, because this time around, when you pointed at the government, it's really coming back to you, and you have to answer. Why are you fighting the government? Don't you want to grow and all of that? So I just hope that the government stay firm, like concerning let them be firm on their decision. Let there be more task force out there this time around, with more other security and agencies and all of that out there, and just making sure that nobody cause trouble. I see those cars being burnt, and I'm just wondering, in this hard time, even if it is your bicycle that gets burnt, we know how much bicycle now is. It's very expensive. Talk more of a car, looking at what we've been seeing concerning how expensive vehicles have become, and it's really a sad one. So I just hope that it's being curtailed and then nothing like that repeats itself again.
Honestly, like Sir Rachel, we are the reason, we are the cause of the problem we are facing, and we keep saying the government is not giving us the basic infrastructure we need, and they're doing that, and then we are fighting that same change. You know, as we were talking, I just couldn't help but cast my mind back. Still here in Plateau State, we saw where the former NT Park has been relocated to a different park, but I still see these vehicles parking on the road, Rachel. And I say the reason why they are parking is because they still have people patronizing them. If nobody goes, they will have no choice but to go to the new park that has been given. There is a master plan for every state, and if we are having the security agency trying to follow the master plan, let's not frustrate their efforts. Follow the rules and the regulation. There are guidelines guiding every country. No wonder you made mention of other countries that we say have been civilized because they choose to do the right thing, but we are fighting. So I hope that if you are a trader out there and you're listening to us, please, it might be difficult at a point like that, but we just hope that you just follow the guidelines. There are a lot of shops. I mean, I made mention one of which is a satellite market. Lots of empty shops, and there are nobody there. And I think the government will give out a very surprise, and it belongs to the government after all. So we hope that we'll follow those guidelines. Well, before we continue further with the paper review, we would love to take a break at this moment, let you chew the story. What do you have to say about the issue we are facing in the health sector, where we're saying there are no public health workers, as well as even drugs are not available for patients? We're seeing various stories on the paper, the cost of revenue, inflation, what the government is saying about a hardship allegation coming from the New York Times. So quite a number of stories. You can actually chip in your own thoughts about it. We will really welcome your contribution on our Facebook and YouTube. Please stay tuned with us. We will be right back after this timeout. Welcome back. It's still the Dailies. We have a number of stories. We're looking at UNICEF talking about the issue of the cholera outbreak in the country, and as well sending, warning and signal to states to do something before it gets out of control, especially in school areas. We have a number of stories as well talking about inflation, about 33.94%, and then we're also seeing the New York Times hardship allegation, according to the federal government, which they feel is not true. So quite a number of stories, which we said we really would love to have your own thoughts about those stories. I still have Rachel Tanzo with me. Thank you, Rachel. All right, let's take a look at the next paper, which is the Punch newspaper. Import duty, federal government summons 80 private jet owners over operating papers. Custom plans clamp down on improperty. Imported private jets begin probe Wednesday, which is tomorrow. Senate to receive 2024 supplementary budget July. You can find out on page 24. 137 federal institutions subscribe to student loan. This is coming from the NEL fund, data found on page 10. The big story, cholera spread. Fear of school outbreak rises as pupils resume. Lagos Emergency Committee meets. UNICEF expert urge sanitation in schools. So I hope that we return back those washing hand basins, running water, as well as other measures, making sure for boarding schools, please, there should be thorough investigation and also checking into the way the food is being prepared, drinking water is made safe and all of that, so we can be able to cut down, the issue of this cholera spread. And on Salah, we have National Assembly leaders visit Tinubu and pledge support, where we can see them present there with the even other stakeholders. We can see the president in the middle with all the people who went to visit him. Presidency Obi clash over the new presidential jet. And we have a 3-year-old boy missing during Salah celebration in Lagos. We hope that his family will be able to find him. Abducted MD others still in captivity as rescue efforts continue. More detail found on page 4, and that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On the Nation newspaper, Emir crisis, presidency dismisses Kwankwaso's Kano alarm. Ex-governor alleges state plot, police warn against booing Sanusi, security beef up around main palace. You can start with the details on the front page. February replaces 23 Rivers Council bosses. Governor directs civil servants to take charge. Tinubu for Ramaphosa's second time. Operation details can be found on page 3. Algon canvasses 4-year tenure for council escorts. Details can be found on page 3. We have a picture story where we can see former President Obasanjo visit the First Lady, Reni Tinubu, and that's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
On the Daily Times newspaper, Tinubu to attend inauguration of South African President Ramaphosa, which he actually took. He left the country yesterday to depart for Lagos, for South Africa for the inauguration. You can read more detail of that in the paper. Obi faults plan to purchase presidential aircraft for Tinubu and Shetima. Says plan unacceptable, shows disconnect with people's plight. Flays construction of 21 billion naira official residence of the vice president amid economic hardship. More detail can be found in the paper. UAE to lift visa ban on Nigerians soon, says Kiyamo. We'll keep our fingers crossed for that. Labaja tax troops to remain resilient in combating terrorism. Police denounce booing of Emir Sanusi, warn troublemakers. Algon seek 4-year tenure for local government officials. And we have the NAF airstrike kill over 80 terrorists, destroy their motorcycles. NAF airstrike kill over 80 terrorists, destroy their motorcycles. And we have a picture story where we can see the Lagos Waste Management Authority commencing vinegar and clearance at the Ahmedu Bello Way, Victoria Island in Lagos recently. And that's all on Daily Times newspaper.
On New Telegraph, the big story, Salah spending triggers Naira scarcity nationwide. The writer says POS operators charge 100% commission, claim bank officials, NURTW food vendors sell Naira to them at exorbitant rates. No cash in many banks' ATMs. 152 commercial motorcycles missing in Delta during festivities. Details can be found on page 3 and 26. Coming from FAAC, e-transfer levy earnings dropped by 15.97% to 15.15 billion naira. FIRS posts second lowest revenue. You can start with the details on the front page. Energy Bank Nigeria's quest for headquarters economically strategic. Details can be found on page 17. Tinubu to attend South African President Ramaphosa's inauguration today. Obi tackles federal government over move to buy new presidential plane. Tension in Rivers as youth sees 2 council areas. Israeli PM scraps war cabinet after key departures. Details can be found on page 4. MultiChoice reverts to old rates for DSTV Go TV. Island epicenter of Lagos cholera outbreak. This is coming from the health commissioner. I'm lonely, Otu tells APC leaders in South. Nigerians will soon appreciate what Tinubu is doing to resuscitate the economy. Military airstrike killed over 80 terrorists in Katsina. This is a report from the NAF. Says 35 women, children rescued at Lake Chad. In Nasarawa, NSCDC foil bandit attack on command headquarters. Details can be found on page 4. Again, ASU rejects new varsity governing council, says leads made up of retired politicians, insists dissolved councils yet to conclude tenure. Abia APC members petition Tinubu, says only 2 nominees are party members. Details can be found on page 2 and 8. There is a study that says supplement lowers aggression in human. Details can be found on page 27, and that's all the news on New Telegraph newspaper.
On the Vanguard newspaper, Nigeria's oil output rises to 1.46 million barrels per day, not 1.7 million per day, claimed by the federal government. More detail can be found on page 19. Rivers youth occupy the local government headquarters as chairman tenure expires. Tension in prisons over rising food inflation. 750 naira now inadequate to feed 1 inmate per day, and I hope that they look into that price. I mean, even 1,000 naira is too small to feed inmates. I mean, they are there to be corrected and not to be starved to death. I hope that the government will look into that. More detail found on page 9. Edo Guba Ivory reenact Oshomole's infrastructure revolution. You can find that on page 16. And on kidnapped families of Lebanese nationals, repulse police intervention. And on local government autonomy, we will wait Supreme Court decision, says Senate. The big story, Nigerians struggle as high drug price fuel the health crisis. Out of pocket payment on the increase, patients care threatened. Rising costs force resort to herbal remedies and traditional healers. Worry over unpredictable effectiveness of the traditional medicine. More detail found in the paper. Over 2,700 pilgrims suffer heat stroke exhaustion as weather hits 48 degrees Celsius. Detail can be found on page 8. And we have on sport, Finidi NFF acts tangles over Oshime, where we have open disciplinary proceed against him. More detail can be found on page 8. We still have Obasanjo visit the First Lady as a picture down, and then upside we have a picture of Akpabio visit Tinubu and other senators that actually accompanied him during the break celebration, and that's all on the Vanguard newspaper.
On First News, federal government denies renaming Murtala Mohammed Expressway amid Soyinka naming controversy. APC betrayed trust. Lukman slams party's failures on campaign promises under Tinubu. NAF airstrike neutralizes 80 terrorists in Katsina. Chief Imam Salaram stolen in Jos sparks outrage. Local government chairman in Niger beaten to stupor over unpaid debt. The big story on First News newspaper, stop this impunity, insensitivity and shamelessness. Peter Obi kicks against new presidential jets plan. Asks Tinubu's government to refocus on needs of Nigerians. Obasanjo visits Oluremi Tinubu for Salah celebration amidst recent criticism. Customs boss raises alarm, drugs barons recruiting officials to evade checks. On cholera outbreak, cases in Lagos now declining as UNICEF urges Nigeria to safeguard schools. And that's all the news on First News newspaper.
On the Metrics newspaper, 80 private jet owners face scrutiny as federal government requests operating papers. Also here we are having on Euro 2024, Belgium, Ukraine lost as France begin campaigning with victory. Detail found on page 16. Fresh tenor in Rivers as Fulbara local government chairman head for showdown. Angry youth storm secretariat demand chairman's exit. Police issue warning to troublemakers. More detail found in the paper. Truce at last, days after donning Tinubu's signature cap. Obasanjo visits First Lady in Lagos. More detail can be found on page 3. Tinubu jet out to South Africa to attend Ramaphosa's inauguration today. You can find out on page 3. Purchase of the new presidential aircraft. Peter Obi blasts the federal government. Says decision highlight disconnect between the government and the people. It's time for political class to stop recklessness and focus on needs of the people. Demand a more compassionate use of resources, prioritize citizens' welfare. Detail found on page 2. Tragedy in Ondo as 500 level student takes her life after church vigil. More detail can be found on page 5. The issue of mental health is really serious. We need to check on one another and not allow depression, stress to actually get into us. Nigeria AU Minister established Continental AI Plan for Digital Transformation. And on the cholera, Commissioner raises alarm of highly aggressive contagious strain as death toll hits 15. You can find that story on page 15. And we have numerous potential fatal scenarios have arisen throughout our GOC. You can find who is saying that on page 14. And that's all the Metrics newspaper.
On Daily News Hub, I fear nothing, no one, Fubara dares Wike. The big story, Rivers crisis, Wike Fubara shift battleground to LG Secretariat as disagreements over cancelled chairman's tenure expiration spark protest. Police take over LG Secretariat amid tension. Armed youths parade creeks in riverine councils, vow to escort caretakers committee to take over councils. Warn your children to avoid being used as cannon fodder, police advise parents. Asari Dokubo urges outgoing LG chairman to avoid causing crisis, says your tenure is over. This one don't pass Jaga Idris Abdul Karim on hardship order Tinubu's government. Algon seeks 4-year tenure for LG officials. Kola Abiola not fit to be president, couldn't sustain father's legacy, coming from MKO's son Abdul. NAF airstrike kills 80 terrorists in Katsina. Many feared killed as gunmen attack Anambra communities. Delta police arrest general overseer over attempt to kidnap bishop. France cutting troops in West Central Africa to 600. This is coming from a source. Euro 2024, Ukraine, Belgium suffer shock defeat. Tinubu's government under cabal siege, ex-minister Dalung alleges. Obasanjo visits First Lady Remi 48 hours after donning Tinubu cap. And that's all the news on Daily News Hub newspaper.
All right, let's round it up with the Business Day newspaper. World Bank applauds Nigerians' bold reform, offers $15 billion support. You can find more detail of what that entails on page 31. Investors stifled by 17 property registration hurdle in Lagos. Nigeria loses 400,000 barrels of crude oil daily coming from Nexa. Governors prioritize the Rixin Power Market new tariff to launch state electricity. And here we have the PFAs face pressure from retirees as federal government fails to pay pensions, where we have government last paid 13.89 billion naira pension in 2022. Expert canvasses stronger legislature reserve fund to protect the industry. More detail can be found on the front page and on page 30. We have a picture story here where we can see talking about some of the players and what was given to them at Enugu. We can see the governor there, Governor Imba, with other players as well. You can do well to get the paper and read more detail of any of the story that is of interest to you, and that's how far we can go on the dailies. Thank you, Rachel, for doing this with me.
You're welcome, Sarah.
Thank you to our viewers, our supporters, and even the members of the crew for making this program a success. To have a great day ahead.